Tension escalates in the Middle East following the declaration of hostilities by the Islamic group Hamas against Israel, marking the outbreak of terrorist attacks that reverberated across various regions of southern Israel in October 2022. During Shabbat celebrations, a sacred day filled with dances and chants, the faithful could hardly imagine that they would soon become targets of attacks by the militant group. Hamas, an acronym for the Islamic Resistance Movement, is led by Mohammed Daif, who announced a surprise attack on that Saturday, calling on all those who possessed weapons to employ them. If you have a weapon, use it. This is the moment. Attack with trucks, cars, axes. Today begins the most noble and honorable narrative, he proclaimed. Hamas, a Palestinian faction labeled as a terrorist organization and governing the Gaza Strip, is not seen as representing the entire Palestinian population. With its own code of conduct and statute, it operates autonomously from the Palestinian government. In retaliation, Israel focused its counterattack not on all of Palestine, but specifically on Hamas. Thousands of missiles were fired toward Israel, reaching even the outskirts of Jerusalem. In a coordinated operation, Hamas forces infiltrated Israeli territory by land, air, and sea. Buildings and communities near the border were bombed and invaded, with military bases being compromised, and both Israeli military personnel and civilians being captured as hostages. Subsequently, Hamas initiated the expulsion of civilians from their homes, primarily targeting women, the elderly, and children, and held them captive in the Gaza Strip to deter a direct response from Israel in the area. Additionally, they transported the bodies of deceased Israeli citizens to their controlled areas. In an official statement, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu declared that Israel was in a state of war and that the offensive would be taken to the core of Gaza in a manner never seen before. This coordinated operation is viewed as the most impactful since the Yom Kippur War in the 1970s. Following Netanyahu's statement, U.S. President Joe Biden expressed his support for Israel, condemning the action carried out by Hamas. Today, the citizens of Israel have been victimized by an offensive planned by the terrorist organization Hamas, and in this time of adversity, I want to affirm to them, to the world, and to extremists across the globe that the United States stands with Israel. We will never cease our support. We will ensure that the population receives the necessary assistance and maintains its capacity for defense, Biden declared. Innocent lives were lost, injuries were inflicted, and entire families were abducted, all in the aftermath of one of the holiest days in the Jewish calendar. The brutality was unimaginable. It's worth noting that Israel is globally recognized for its excellence in surveillance, intelligence, and electronic security. Many experts are baffled by how an attack of such magnitude could occur, and the critical failures observed may have repercussions, with the population demanding answers from the government. Furthermore, global geopolitical questions arise, questioning who would benefit from such an offensive. In-depth analysis suggests a complex geopolitical scenario involving Saudi Arabia and Iran. Both nations, previously at odds, have found some common ground facilitated by China. Meanwhile, Saudi Arabia is on the verge of formalizing a peace agreement with Israel, mediated by the United States. However, this initiative is viewed with disdain by Iran, which opposes seeing Saudi Arabia aligned with one of its historical adversaries. The geopolitical plot is intricate, and the repercussions of the attack in Israel reflect the underlying tensions and disparate interests among nations on the global stage. When examining the global landscape, it becomes apparent that the agreement between Israel and Saudi Arabia may face temporary delays due to the armed conflicts. Both regions, Israel and Palestine, are home to innocent civilians, including women, the elderly, and children, who, though not involved in the conflicts, can be affected by hostilities. The complexity deepens when considering that Hamas, not representing the entirety of the Palestinian population, governs the Gaza Strip with its own agenda, distancing itself from other Palestinian political groups with varying views and goals. Palestine exhibits notable political and geographical diversity, and it's worth noting that 7% of its population is Christian. It's important to emphasize that Israel has not declared war on Palestine or its people, but specifically on the Hamas group. The issue of territory and regional challenges has deep roots. Israel, situated in the Middle East along the eastern shore of the Mediterranean Sea, shares borders with several countries, including Egypt, Syria, and Lebanon. The country has been a focal point of conflicts and tensions that have captured global media attention, although its history extends far beyond recent hostilities. Israel's history reaches back to periods preceding the modern era, with a cultural and historical legacy that has exerted significant influence on the Western world. The history of Israel and its people is often intertwined with biblical texts that recount the adversities and journeys of the Jewish people throughout history, often in the name of their faith and in defense of their territory against opposing forces. The Bible is one of the richest sources of Jewish history, revealing the complex layers of conflicts and geopolitical interactions that have shaped the region over the centuries. A deep understanding of Israeli history and regional dynamics is crucial for comprehending the current events involving the country and its neighbors. The sacred text not only forms the foundation of Christian teachings, but also serves as an intriguing starting point to aid in understanding the contemporary conflict in the region and its roots. Thus, beginning from the beginning, the saga of the Jewish and Palestinian peoples starts with Abraham. As described in the Bible, God promised Abraham a land known as Canaan, the ancient home of the Canaanites, which was later named Palestine, where the state of Israel is located today. This heavenly promise was reaffirmed to Moses and later to Joshua. At that time, the region was inhabited by rival tribes to the Israelites, such as the Philistines. In the historical fabric, a significant episode is recounted in the first book of Samuel, where David, a young Hebrew who would ascend to the throne of Israel, faces and defeats Goliath, a formidable Philistine warrior. Although this event is dated around 1490 BC, conflicts over the region of Palestine had been unfolding for a long time, with the land being shared among the 12 tribes of Israel, who were adversaries of the Philistines. After the reign of Solomon, a descendant of David, the Israelites split into two kingdoms, Israel in the north and Judah in the south. Over the centuries, the Assyrian hegemony, characterized as a dominant and belligerent nation, subdued the surrounding lands to Israel, and after intense battles, annexed the kingdom of Israel, leaving only the kingdom of Judah. It is from this designation that the term Jews arises to refer to the Hebrews, as documented in the second book of Kings in the Bible. Throughout the centuries, the region now known as Israel has been at the epicenter of conquests and conflicts involving various nations, such as the Babylonian captivity under Nebuchadnezzar and Greek and Roman subjugations. The territory of Palestine, adjacent to the eastern coast of the Mediterranean, and the land that would later be called Israel, were under the governance of various empires, including the Babylonians, Egyptians, Muslims, and ultimately the Ottoman Empire. However, with the dissolution of Ottoman rule in the 20th century and the emergence of the Republic of Turkey, the Middle East underwent significant restructuring, with Palestine becoming a British mandate. As for the contemporary history of the Jews, from the 20th century onward, there is a sequence of armed conflicts and tragic events, many of which in some way involve Palestinian communities. The intricate blend of historical, cultural, and political narratives continues to influence the dynamics and interactions between Israel and Palestine, reflected in the persistent difficulties and tensions in the region to this day. The described context points to an unprecedented situation in which Israel faces a direct threat to its population, in contrast to the usual military confrontations that characterized much of the 20th century and its history. On November 2, 1917, the British government took a significant step by supporting the establishment of a Jewish state in Palestine through the Balfour Declaration. This statement marked a decisive milestone in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, as it was the first occasion when a world power expressed support for the conception of a Jewish state in that region. The Jewish community welcomed this move, seeing it as an opportunity to fulfill the millennia-old dream of settling in the land of Canaan. However, Palestinian Arabs viewed the declaration with reservation and anxiety, fearing it would result in the loss of their land and rights. While multiple attempts and external announcements have been made to establish Israel as a state, many encountered significant barriers. A landscape of brutal violence against civilians and cruelties, as mentioned, was previously only observed during the Holocaust in World War II, led by Adolf Hitler, which resulted in the death of millions of Jews. Even though the magnitude is undeniably greater, the text evokes a resonance between the actions of Hamas and that infamous chapter in Jewish history. In the year 1947, following the end of World War II, the United Nations proposed the partition of Palestine into two nations, one Jewish and one Arab. However, Palestinian Arabs rejected the proposal, triggering a conflict against Israel. The battle resulted in an Israeli victory and the subsequent declaration of independence in 1948, with David Ben-Gurion becoming the prime minister. It's worth noting that a Brazilian lawyer, Osvaldo Aranha, played a prominent role in this transformative stage during the administration of Gaspar Dutra. Despite the image of a nation perpetually in a state of conflict, Israel is portrayed as a peaceful country, praised for its security and tourist appeal. Conflicts of considerable magnitude, such as the one described, are seen as exceptions, and the text suggests that the current situation represents a marked departure from the historical pattern of security and stability in the area. Among the historical conflicts that have shaped the region, it is imperative to mention the Yom Kippur War, or the 1973 Arab-Israeli War. The Jews, while observing Yom Kippur, the holiest day in their religious calendar, were caught off guard by an intense assault from neighboring nations aimed at destabilizing Israel. However, the current climate of tension does not depict a conflict between Israel and Palestine, but rather between Israel and the Hamas military group. This conflict has caused immense pain, especially for Palestinian civilians who yearn for peace, but now face the consequences of the activities of this militant group. The future outlook for the region remains uncertain in the wake of this recent conflict, which has brought pain and suffering to many. Israel, known for its military readiness and technological innovation, remains in a strong position. However, the nature of the conflict with Hamas, which targets the civilian population rather than the Israeli armed forces, makes the situation especially regrettable. The loss of innocent lives, both Israeli and Palestinian, bears grim witness to the human toll of these confrontations. We express our empathy for the victims and their families impacted by the assaults and violent acts. We hope that resilience and the pursuit of peace will endure in the hearts of people, paving the way for an end to the destruction and sorrow that have plagued the region. We also extend our solidarity to Palestinian civilians who have endured hardships in this disheartening scenario. May the words of the prophets, who foresee a future of peace between Israel and its neighboring nations, become a reality, leading the region on a path of reconciliation and peaceful coexistence. We thank you for joining us in this video. If you've enjoyed the content, please click the like button and subscribe to stay updated with our future releases. Goodbye.